Welcome, everybody, to the I Know Nothing podcast. Today we have on Joe Beckert. Joe and I worked together for, I don't know, at least a few years.
Yeah,
And we've stayed in touch for what, a decade now? Just going back and forth with everything from daily life to training. And Joe runs a business, which he's going to tell you about. So, Joe, some people might know you from AW and from Westchester, but a lot of my athletes up here might not know you. So could you just give us like a brief rundown of who you are and why people should listen to you?
sure. I went to school, I have exercise science background. I started with you in Westchester. That was immediately following college. Uh, and we got thrown right in, man. We got to get into the athlete, get into the team training, get into the lifestyle, which was really cool at the time. And I love it. You love it. That's why we're still in it. That's why we still do it. So I am a strength and conditioning coach or personal trainer, whatever you want to call it. Whatever that actually means. I'm a business owner. Uh, I still identify myself as an athlete. I think both of us will for our entire life. And I like to think of myself as a lifelong student, always learning, always trying to get better. There's a ton of stuff out there, not all that's good. Um, but I think if you take the approach that you can see some good in something and kind of decipher all the rest of this stuff, I think you can be a lot better for it. So always learning for myself and for everybody around me, including clients, as that is my lifestyle. Of course, that's my paycheck, if you want to put it that way. Uh, and I like to identify this kind of industry as, we're professional coaches. So, yeah, training might be something, mentor might be something, you might have a little bit of nutrition, but you are a professional coach. So, communication should be at the utmost importance. That kind of thing. So that's kind of who I am. I worked with you in Westchester. I moved back over to Connecticut where I live, bounced around a few different gyms. And right as the pandemic started, I opened up a studio space, which we've since expanded. We have about 2,500 square feet in Ridgefield, Connecticut. We got about 5 trainers here, and that's what I do. I love it. We work with everybody. We work with kids all the way up to adults. My oldest client currently is 87. And the youngest girls we've had, 12, 13, 14. But mainly Gen Pop, 40 to 60-ish is kind of our sweet spot as far as what we see. Yeah, and you've kind of stayed in the athletic realm, which is really cool, but we kind of treat everybody like that, an athlete. That's the kind of training background. It might not be sprint speed per se, but it might be gait mechanics and how to move a little bit better. It might not be a max intensity box jump, but it's some kind of plyometric where as adults age, it's bone density, it's elasticity of tissue, it's change of direction, all those things. So kind of kept the same mindset, although the people in front of you might be a little bit different.
Cool. The way I've been doing this is I kind of give everybody a background of, well, I want you to give the background of what you were like, as an athlete, as a kid growing up, the things that you did, and maybe just take us up through until, I mean, I guess maybe like to the end of your powerlifting career, but what you did as a kid, sport wise, and then all the way through to, to powerlifting.
Sure. So as a young guy, I got into soccer. That was kind of the first love. Uh, Took it through about 8th grade, didn't really love it, didn't continue it in high school. Soon after starting soccer as a young guy, I picked up basketball and I kind of carried that all the way through high school. I still play in adult league. That I still really love, which is awesome. Great workout, great friends, great guys around. And kind of when I put down that as a priority in high school, I kind of transitioned into weightlifting and track and field. So I was a 100-meter sprinter. I threw shot put. That was kind of a good off season, and I liked the training for it. Whether you want to categorize it this way or not, but I'm a little bit more fast twitch. If you want to talk fiber type or break down that way, and really got into weightlifting. Had an early passion for it. I loved it. I thought being a savage was pretty cool. So my wife Haley always picks on me. She's like, "Why are you still doing that?" I'm like, "You give me a spot on a bench press 315." She's like, "Why are you still doing this? You're 32 years old." I'm like, "Because I can. It's great. I love it." So no aspirations to compete in the future, but I competed all over New England and some of the country actually. Got invited to the Arnold Classic my senior year in college. I competed in raw modern, which is no gear. And then if you're familiar with powerlifting, I did the whole gear thing too. So bench shirt, squat suit, deadlift, the whole thing. So I competed in RPS, USAPL, 100% raw federation for whatever they're worth. I had records in all of them. Not that I boast about that, because unless you have a true all-time world record that stands, that's all that matters. But yeah, I loved it. I loved it. Good team atmosphere there, although it's an individual sport. Great push. You learn a lot about yourself. And so far in life, strength is never a weakness. You know, it can be used for everything.
I was trying to look up your numbers on
Yeah,
RPS, but that website's always a little bit 50-50.
yeah, it's archaic.
Listen, I know you're super humble, but would you mind like stating just some of the big lifts that you hit? Because I think it's
Sure.
important for people to understand really how strong you are.
Yeah,
It's just important.
yeah. So I gave the gear thing, and for people that don't know that, compressive suit that gives the joint a little stability, and you certainly get rebound in the hardest part of the lift. So usually the bottom part. So in the squat, I had squatted 725 at my best at 181 pounds body weight. I benched 540 at 181, and I pulled 625. And then raw numbers, obviously a little bit less. I squat about 540. I benched 350, and I pulled 600.
Yes. So everybody who's listening, that's the type of strength you're talking about. You know,
I mean, my best feet though, 19. I pulled 140 or 545 at 175 pound body weight, and that was just started college. So I don't like to live in the past, but as far as impressive things, if I were to stand by one thing, that was the most impressive, I think. It factoring in age and weight.
most people who are listening to this can't even fathom lifting half of any of those weights. So
Yeah,
there's a lot of reasons I wanted to highlight it. You know, the personal quick story on my end is everyone who doesn't know, Joe got me into powerlifting, and you know, him and I used to sit next to each other, literally 4 inches apart every day, and we would just talk training. And later on in this podcast, we're gonna go over how him and I developed philosophies and like combine both of our philosophies. But my point is you literally taught me what powerlifting was, how awesome it can be, and then how I could use it both for myself for the rest of my life, but also I've used a lot of the stuff that we did training wise, you know, with my athletes. But one of the biggest things that I've learned, and I've noticed it the last, 4 years now that I've been kind of on my own, is understanding what it's like to actually be strong. Not that I was anywhere near your numbers, but the strength I was able to get to in a very short time with you and understanding proper loading, proper rest, proper structure, everything has taught me how to feel what athletes need to feel and understand, like, okay, wow, this is what it actually takes to be strong. And one of the things that was like an aha moment for me was you had loaded up a bar. I didn't even know. I think it was like 455. And I'm like, Joe, I can't lift this weight. And you literally looked at me, he goes, I've never seen you miss a squat before. And I was like, wow, I was so hesitant to get to that point, even though I wanted to be strong. But sometimes you need a coach. And Joe was basically my coach for a year. And it's just important that we touch base on like how important it is. Like you said, I know strength is never a weakness, but sometimes people don't understand what strong is. And that's why one of the reasons I wanted you to come on and talk about things, because you understand what true strength is. You have a lot of friends who are in the powerlifting world, like you know what true strength is. And sometimes I deal with it from the athlete side and parent side and coaches side where they're like, we got to get stronger. And I'm like, do you mean get stronger, or do you want to attach a band to something and act like you're strength training? There was really no point or next question to that. I just wanted to let everyone know, like, the impact you had on me, but all the things I learned from that year or so of training together of what it takes to be strong and how to train other people and how to feel what they feel, when you're training with such intensities. Um, what I did wanted to ask you though is like, you know, you had been powerlifting since what, high school, right? You had started?
yeah. I started in bench press only competitions about 16, and I think my last meet was 2017. So I did it close competitively for about 10 years.
Okay. The point I'm trying to make to everybody, because this is, and you know, this is just a huge debate and issue in the world of strength and conditioning. I know you, and I know you said you're fast twitch, but ever since I've known Joe, he has a different level of, I will call, bounce. You can jump, you snap out of a hole better than anybody I've ever seen in a squat, and you powerlifted for a decade, but you also played very competitive basketball. Can you just go through like your overall training, powerlifting, track, basketball, and how did you maintain being such a good athlete, but you also powerlifted?
Well, I loved both. That's a starter. That helps. I certainly was passionate for both, and I kind of found at an early age that I was pretty good at both of them. I will say training helped a ton with the plyometric piece, even though maybe I didn't exactly know what I was doing at the time or applying it properly, but I kind of always had a little bit of that spring even before training. Um, I think there are right ways and wrong ways to do it. And maybe I missed a little bit of window as far as I didn't know enough earlier on, but I had started with an old guy back at the gym I trained at in high school. I mean, even at the time, I think he was 83. And it was funny because one of my training partners was a 500-pound bencher. I'm like, what is this 83-year-old going to do? But he read all the old magazines. He was really, really old school. He had a great approach with volume where it wasn't fatigue, which I think a lot of kids don't get, where it's too high volume, too high intensity. He was like, no, 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 no. Things need rest. Things need to be crisp. Things need to be proper, explosive, whatever it might be. So he's who I really got my first tips from. But really, I love them both. So that kind of was helpful to me. And once I saw some direct carryover, weightlifting came second. I said, this is pretty cool. This can help out a ton.
Yeah, and the reason I bring it up is because I mean I've definitely made the mistake of before I knew everything, well, everything, before I was taught by you about powerlifting, about the conjugate system, about what powerlifting actually was in terms of the training, I had no idea. And I had done it where I had trained some kids, just heavy loading them, like, oh, they should get faster, and they all got slower. So I've been on like the back and forth because I know for a fact what can work, at least again, for my population is the high school and college athlete for the most part, but your proof that you can power lift properly with structure under the guidance of a professional, and you can still be a really good athlete and hopefully use the variations of powerlifting and the thought process and philosophies of training of on powerlifting and add it to your program if it's done correctly. And I think a lot of the times right now there's just so much noise with training. I was just curious if there was a specific way that you were training, or if it was just that you always had bounce and the additional powerlifting just made that even better. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think there's a exact answer there, but early on, I had found the conjugate. I had found the dynamic effort method. We did a ton of that together. Maybe it wasn't a ton of accommodating resistance, but it was fast and slow days. And I think that will help you most with the strength curve. I don't think it'll help you most with the power output, but what it does, it allows you to train more often, higher frequencies, more days, whatever it might be, because that's appropriate on the nervous system. You're not getting burnt out. You're not hitting the same numbers. You're not in the same rep scheme. I always think training is an hourglass. You're not under the same hourglass. When the set starts, that's the quicksand. That's the timer. So messing with some of those different protocols and energy systems, whatever you want to call it, I think that was really, really beneficial. But another thing too is powerlifting, not in a sense of just the meathead stuff. I mean, it certainly started that way, but as you get a little bit more into it, it's the goal is the most weight, but is it doing it properly? And for any exercise, as a personal trainer or strength coach, you know this, but there's a barrier for entry. There's prerequisites that you must have mobility wise to complete these movements. And you can take that with a grain of salt, because if you've been with somebody for so long, maybe you just throw it in because they should be able to. But you should have this degree range of motion in order to complete this, or you should check this box before we go here. So the progression regression model is really, really important to start to understand to be able to get to that level. So I think you're able to keep kind of both aspects of strength and power if moving properly and efficiently is a priority.
100%. And
Function.
for sure. And I think the reason for all my tangents I just went on about all that is I am seeing that it seems like there's more strength coaches and personal trainers than ever. In my area alone, you can't drive 2 miles without seeing a specific strength facility here. This person's the best speed and agility coach here. I'm like, where did all these people come from? And the reason I brought this topic up, and we can move on from it, is like, have they done it as a coach in training? And a lot of the times when I talk to a coach or someone, I'm like, I don't care that if you squatted 500 pounds, but I do care that you understand yourself what it means to actually train properly. And I think it's a huge missing piece, both in the education of where we come from, right? I was never required to go through a training program as an exercise science major or whatever. And I think it's just a missing piece right now. And again, you're just the epitome of someone who did it, and now you can continue to do it. But again, sometimes I just feel as though people are going to strength coaches because they just like, oh, I go to a strength coach. But strength coach, what is your background? Do you have a background in training people? Because I obviously not everybody needs to be super strong, powerlifting
No,
strong, but you got to
no.
have some background, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I always ask myself that. I mainly deal with that Gen Pop 40 to 60. Most are athletic in some way, but always ask yourself why. Yeah, strength could yield a hormonal adaptation, which may help with body composition or bone density. Great. Plyometrics too. Great. But are they strong enough for what they need to do in their life? We may still strength train, but it's not linear and taking it as far as it goes. Because why? I got a guy who's 83 years old, loves to push the deadlift. And we had integrated it once he had the proper movement mechanics to kind of fix his low back because it was just good bracing using his hips. But he's like, I want to deadlift 300 pounds at 145. I'm like, you're 83 years old. Why do you need to do that? Can you do all the yard work you want to? Yes. Okay. Well, that's the answer. You don't need to get to that level. Strength training is important and it has its place, but does it have to be at that intensity? No, probably not.
I wanted to ask you, and maybe you kind of are alluding to this, but from the time you started training to what you do now with the population you're working with, just give us some basics of like your philosophies that have maintained or philosophies that may have changed.
Sure. So, I mean, it's changed a lot, and I don't think you're a good coach if it hasn't. I've gone forward, backwards, and back all around again. I think it was hot and sexy and fun to do something flashy and crazy, over program, try to fit too much in an hour or whatever it might be, something that looks fun or might be fun. And then I went really, really basic. Let's hammer basics, maybe linear progression. This kind of encompasses everything. And now I think I'm somewhere in between where still trying to take a wholesome all around approach, but still relatively basic with some variety. We kind of operate on moving better, move first. Our joints in right positions. What's the soft tissue response like? How does it feel? You might not believe in something, but something that I've learned over time is if something feels good to the client, well, then that carries a lot of weight, even if you're not a believer, even if you've seen it not work, even if research doesn't support a adaptation or change. If they say it feels good, there's a lot to be said about that because there certainly is a psychology piece too. But I do mainly do strength work with most people. I think that stayed pretty consistent. I primarily operate as far as conditioning, what the client's goals are. Joel Jamieson has some great conditioning stuff out there. We do a lot of cardiac power or cardiac output based on what they need or what nervous system is like or what recovery is like. But strength and plyometric are definitely the utmost importance. And that's kind of stayed continuous. Early stages, I love the back squat. I don't love the back squat so more if we want to talk specifics. I mix in a little bit of safety squat bar with some people. Some people that have the shoulder range, maybe it's a good isometric. Get the scaps retract, get the arms in external rotation. You get to hold it there, but most people don't have that free range, and that's not really that comfortable. And I think the extension pattern in the lumbar is probably not worth it. You can teach them out of it, you can coach them out of it, but you probably get a bit bigger bang with the anterior load, heavy goblet, heavy front. I love the Zercher. So I definitely still do a lot of powerlifting moves. I definitely still bench with a lot of people, but it might be partial. It might be pin press, might be reverse band. You walk in here, you might see a 70-year-old on a reverse band setup, and you're like, what? Probably not bench press, because what's the point there? But maybe some squat pattern that's assisted that way, because it'll get them to get more work. And although, yeah, we don't power lift with everybody, and that's certainly not what we're about, I do believe in talking to coaches and seeing coaches. Somebody that understands powerlifting is probably the best programmer. And it might be in cardio, it might be in conditioning. They might have taken it and said, well, how can I do this with running or plyometrics? But they understand the progression, the deload, the nervous system, undulation, whatever it might be. I feel like they get it the most. So I definitely stand strong on that kind of background, but it might not necessarily be typical powerlifting, but a programming, a periodization, an outline, something like that. I definitely stand by. I've had favorite exercises up and down. I used to push a ton overhead with people. What's the point? Throw them on a landmine. You're going to get the same amount of work. Back off in a little bit of flexion. You get a little brace. Great. You can get just as much benefit probably out of that. So different things I've kind of tweaked as far as exercise selection, but I think for the most part, ideas, ideologies, methodologies have kind of all stayed the same.
You're probably one of the most smart people I've ever met in this industry. And my question to you is, obviously you did it as an athlete, like you were powerlifting, so you did this at a young age, but like, how did you get so smart so quickly? Because you, right out of college, you walked in and I'm like, Joe literally knows 10 times more than me and more. But like, how did you get so?
Not true.
Well, my point is like, because there's a lot of young coaches who listen to this too, and I'm trying to help young coaches that were in our shoes. Not everybody had the luxury that we had. Not everybody got to sit next to each other every single day and just talk methodology and then go test it out on ourselves and on athletes all day long, right? That's all we did. No, many people don't have that luxury. So I'm trying to understand and give people like, okay, how did you get so smart up to that point? Like, who were you listening to? What were you doing? And then from that point on to now, is there specific methods or certifications or seminars or books that you recommend? Because I think there's just a lot out there right now, and it's not very pinpointed down.
Sure. So, I mean, as far as early on through high school, I was a little unusual in the sense I just worked the desk inside a weight room as just supervision. My high school had a contract. That's where we would all go after school. That was kind of our field house. They had a weight room inside, but I would work nearly full time, 16 years old. I would open the gym at 4:30 in the morning. So my first start as far as content goes, I must have read Arnold's Encyclopedia 3 times. I was thumbing through that at 16 years old, whatever, 500 pages, whatever it is. So that was my first kind of piece. And a lot of the early stuff was all bodybuilding-esque and powerlifting-esque. I was fortunate enough to go to some seminars. Derek Poundstone, the strongman guy, Dan Green, the powerlifting guy. I was in the Olympic weightlifting realm a little while, so listening and following a lot of that. And then once it became a little bit more sciencey, which you really tipped me off on, a lot of the aerobic protocols, which I really had no idea about. I'm like, fartlek training, what is that? They don't teach you that in school, man. And since a lot of the things that I follow, I'm a big believer in functional rate conditioning systems, the FRC, whether it be Pales Rails, assessment, or controlled articular rotation. I'm a big believer in PRI, Postural Restoration Institute. And more recently, I love the FMS. I love Cook stuff there. Those are all meeting somebody where they're at. what's in front of you and what's there right now. And that's a really good way to start a program, earn a lot of trust, and do what's right for the client. And I think it can, it's simple exercises, and if you don't know it really well, you can butcher it, and it could be awful and detrimental, and maybe you shouldn't do it. But once you really start to understand all the movements and why they're looking at it, and to me, it's a no-brainer. But in the early stages, when I wasn't so confident and I didn't know the information that thorough, I'm like, I don't think this is doing me or them any good. And more recently, I've kind of dove into the Eldoa stuff, which is a lot of spinal decompression and wacky stuff, addressing the nervous system, fascial system, things like that.
Cool. Um, Already we're less than 10 minutes.
Oh God.
I told you it happens fast. I don't want to rush it. And again, this is kind of a cheat code for Joe and I to also catch up and talk. This is all
Yeah, I
we
love this guy.
every day anyway. So
Once a week.
yeah, I'm all in.
Yeah.
But in terms of just like a training breakdown for one of your clients per se, can you just run us through like a mock, like, okay, they come in the door, what happens when someone comes into your door, and then how does it broken up? I know everyone's different, but like what's like a general model in terms of assessment, training, how many times a week, and how long are people staying with you? Hopefully a long time.
Yeah. So when somebody comes in the door, we typically start with an FMS, the functional movement assessment screen. We usually start with an in-body scan, which is a lot like what just a really fancy machine to measure visceral fat, skeletal muscle, body fat, and it has an inflammation marker. We use the in-body 570, and then from there, it's really what we see as far as the programming piece. But we always listen to goals, because just because I tell you it's good for you doesn't mean that's what you need, what you want to do, and we kind of go from there. But we see a lot of people who play pickleball, not competitively, but for fun. Golf, the same thing. So you see a lot of that. And as far as a lot of that Gen Pop age, hip ache, knee ache, shoulder ache, back ache, whatever that might be. So we'll usually start with some kind of movement prep, whether something's a little bit sticky or limiting. And we'll go to maybe a loaded isometric, spend a little time in that scary position. Maybe it's a band, maybe it's a little weight, whatever it might be. Kind of prep the tissue, send the afferent signal to the nervous system and back. It's okay to be here. We want to lay this good tissue. We want to give this good direction. And then start them with whatever patterns appropriate for that movement and that person. I don't think anything's off limits, but we really try to do a good job at customizing and, addressing what's there. And it's funny with the Gen Pop that we see, which I didn't really see in athletes. I know I wasn't there that long, but something's always coming up. And it's cool because once you win their trust and you're with them a long time, you'll be the first person they seek. Now, certainly we pass off to PTs if it's out of our scope, but it's kind of cool that they trust you that way. We'll spend a full hour with them where they might only get 10 minutes in a clinic. And if it is out of our scope, we certainly always refer out. We don't cross barriers. We don't try to do anything manual, but we're honest. And if it is something that we can help with, we dive right in. But I've been in Ridgefield probably now for 7 years. And I would say 90% of my client load I've had since the very first day.
Wow. Okay. Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
We're unfortunately less than 5 minutes. So I'm going to skip some of these other questions I had. They were a little more for you and I to nerd out on, but maybe we'll just have an entire, let's just have a programming podcast next time. Just you and I, like old times. So I've been having everybody finish with, some advice, and for you, because you've worked on so many different populations, I'm going to ask you to say it to two or three different people. So the first one is, do you have a piece of advice for young athletes of today's world? Doesn't matter the sport, just anything. It doesn't have to be strength and conditioning related, but a piece of advice for young athletes.
I actually really loved your tagline, and I think you took it out of your Instagram, but the train smart, train often.
Oh yeah,
or something along those lines.
Train hard, train often.
Yeah, so I really love that. We actually have on our website, and we've had it there for years now, but train smarter, not just harder. We believe in the minimal effective dose. You don't have to crush yourself. You haven't had coffee in a while and you have a sip. Well, that's what it is with all the stimulus in here. If you haven't done that movement in a while, that intensity, that speed, that volume, you're going to get a lot out of a little. So I think listen to your body. Always go in with a program or at least record afterwards. Try to find a mentor. Talk to as many coaches as you can. And consistency is absolutely key. We find in our adults, and I know that you talked about it with Tim and some of your other athletes, but protein is lacking everywhere for the most part. So proper nutrition, train often, sleep and manage stress the best that you can, and find some fun in it. It's got to be enjoyable. You're in it for the long haul. You say, not a lot of people make it to pros. Well, you can do it for your whole life though, at some level, but you got to enjoy it. You got to be doing the right things and want to learn.
For sure. I mean, all that is good. I've tried to make it a point to have people understand that training has got to be in your life in some way, shape, or form. And as much as I love to make sure that someone's getting faster and it's helping them on the field or on the court or wherever, if they're walking into our facility, and I know it's the same for you, and they're walking into your facility and they're not excited to be there, then what's the point? You know what I mean? Just like you're saying, like, why are we back squatting? What's the point? Well, if you're not going to have love for training, I think it's our job to teach them how to love it, not just the biomechanics of a certain movement. So I
Sure.
completely agree. And I think a lot of people, not just young athletes, should take that. Um, I want to have your advice for like coaches too. And this can be strength coaches, this can be sport coaches, but I do want to keep this one around strength and conditioning or speed training or practice. So I'm just going to leave it up to you. What piece of advice do you have for just coaches in general?
Uh, Kind of what I said back with the assessment piece is really important to meet somebody where they're at. Uh, Try to get into their life a little bit without being overbearing or getting too personal, but see what's going on. Nervous system is a funny thing. If a glass is full already, try not to overload it. Try not to keep pouring. Um, Always ask questions. How you feeling? And if you don't like learning and talking to people or and asking questions, maybe this isn't for you. Not that I would discourage or maybe say it that way, but I think that's a constant and a necessary. Uh, the second that you think you know everything, you're not good to anybody, really. So I think it's really important to kind of continue thinking that way and always trying to be better and always asking yourself why. For the longest time after every session, I'd say, what could I have done better? Or why did I do that? Or what could we do next time? That kind of thing. So always kind of giving yourself a gut check, an evaluation yourself as well as them. And don't be afraid to revisit goals. Hear it from them and check back in. Make sure that you both are kind of accountable on the same page and doing what's right by them. And it's really hard to do when you're too busy. So that's also a workload thing where that you kind of have to manage, where you still want to do a good job. You don't just want to crank sessions. That shouldn't be our goal.
Less than a minute, Joe. Um, I know you're primarily in person, but some people, especially some of my athletes or parents and coaches, might want to reach out to you. Is there a email or their website? Where can people find you if they want to reach out?
Sure. Yeah. Our website is our email is info@lifthp.com, and our website is lifthp.com. So
Cool.
that's us. We're here in Ridgefield. If you're ever in the area, pop in.
Sure.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to learn how to get strong, contact Joe. Well, this is going to run out at any point in time. There will definitely be a part two. Maybe we'll just only talk about programming and meathead stuff. But Joe, always great talking to you, man. I appreciate you coming on and taking the time.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate you. We
All right,
know
brother.
nothing, man.
Have a good one.
You too.